Good morning, good afternoon. It is afternoon, in fact. Wherever you are, good evening, perhaps. Welcome to the latest episode of Arcana Unearthed. And what, frankly, a week it has been of D&D news that has just been non-stop. I wasn't planning on doing a live stream this week, but there's been so much news floating around that I really felt as though I needed to hop on live and talk about it all, because it's been a roller coaster of a few days in D&D world. Normally on Arcana Unearthed, I would go through playtest material, but one of the things that was announced this week, which we'll get into, is that playtest is over. So this is now kind of, I don't know, maybe D&D news show, I don't know. But that is what we're going to be covering today, because rumours abound that Dungeons and Dragons is going to be sold off to Tencent. We'll break that down in a moment as well. But also, and I think this is actually possibly, I don't know, this is big news for me, I think, that there is apparently rumours abound as well that a new contract is being sent around to the big creators of third-party D&D materials. So essentially something along the lines of another, to be perhaps hyperbolic about this, another form of OGL, Open Gaming License, possibly. That is me kind of throwing around some hyperbolic stuff, as I say, because it's not quite that in reality. But we'll break that down as well. So we'll do these things in chronological order, because I was really taken aback by a lot of what was going on, and there is a lot to unpack as well. There is a lot more to this story than I think some people are aware of. So I do want to break down exactly what is going on. So let's start with the news that came out. Jeremy Crawford and the Hasbro team put out a video on Tuesday, I believe, to just kind of update us on everything in terms of 1D&D, or the new edition of Dungeons and Dragons, and talk us through what's going on. Playtest is going well. They're very happy with the results of pretty much everything. They're very happy with where everything's going. And so they are soldiering on. But they did confirm a few things. The Player's Handbook playtest program is now over, as I mentioned before, which does kind of put this show kind of... I'm not really sure what we're going to do with Arcana Unearthed, or indeed live streaming over the coming months, but we will see. And please do put your suggestions in the comments below as well. Maybe you want more D&D news stuff like this, maybe you like Game Master chats, I don't know. But let's not make this about us, because the other thing that they confirmed, and I think this was in relation to my last live stream, when they were at PAX a few months ago, it was kind of semi-leaked, accidentally posted by Wizards of the Coast, that the new books would be coming out in May. There was a graphic that was kind of put out on their social media, which was quickly deleted. They have confirmed that as of right now, that is not the plan, and apparently never was the plan, because they were always aware that they were going to be still working on the core rulebooks at that time. Some people are saying that it has been delayed, but I'll be honest, I didn't think the May date made a lot of sense to me in terms of still playtesting things in December. So I don't think that was ever really the plan in reality, despite what I may have said on that video. I'm not sure what I said, to be honest. But it was interesting that those graphics were ever put together in the first place, which is what made me perhaps question that. But the timeline didn't add up, and Jeremy Crawford has said that no, they will still be working on the books in May, which means we're probably looking at a autumn release. I reckon late September, early October, because they want to get in there early enough that people want those books for the holidays and things. So that is the main news in terms of the new edition of D&D in terms of the actual product itself. But we got some juicy tidbits. Rumours abound again of this new license that's going around. Shades of the trauma of last year. But the big news that everybody's talking about at the moment, which I did want to dive into, is this article that came up, and I'll just bring it up on the screen here. This article from, I can't remember, Pan Daily, that went out yesterday, that Hasbro is seeking to sell its IP, Dungeons and Dragons, and has had preliminary contact with Tencent. I'm just going to kind of do a quick skim of basically what's said in this article. So apparently American toy company Hasbro is seeking to sell well-known IP Dungeons and Dragons to Tencent. Now, if you're not familiar with Tencent, they have their fingers in many, many pies. They're a Chinese company. But importantly, and I think this is the detail that a lot of people missed initially when this story first broke, importantly, Tencent are heavy stakeholders in Larian, don't know which way around you're supposed to say it, Larian Studios, who are the publishers and developers on Baldur's Gate 3, which is the Dungeons & Dragons game which took the world by storm last year and won the Game of the Year awards. What you may not know about Larian Studios as well is that actually the people that own Larian, the CEO, he's a huge D&D fan, and in fact, Larian Studios was actually built with creating a D&D video game in mind. It's almost as though it was a 20-year plan, I think 20 years, a 20-year plan to basically create Baldur's Gate 3. So Baldur's Gate 3 was the project that they always wanted to create, and built the company with that in mind, hence why Divinity, Original Sin, and the rest of the games. I'm not overly familiar with Larian, I must admit, aside from Baldur's Gate and Divinity, so I don't know what else they made. But yes, that the company was built with Baldur's Gate 3 in mind. So they love D&D. Now, Tencent have a 30% stake in Larian Studios, which means they're a significant shareholder. And what this article is saying is that following the Game of the Year awards and the critical acclaim, is that Hasbro apparently saw Larian Studios as a potential buyer for Dungeons and Dragons, and we'll get into why they might want to sell Dungeons and Dragons in the first place in a moment once we've gone through this article. But ultimately, Larian themselves don't have the sorts of funds that they need to. So they basically are now acting as a mediator with Tencent in order to have that purchase go through, because of course Tencent are going to want to partner with Larian in terms of making content, because Larian know the IP and they have the developers, etc., to do that. So now this is where things get interesting, and this is the bit that I think is really the proper meat of this, is that Hasbro is in big trouble. And if you look at the numbers, and you can view the financial report, it is available online, I believe, because they're a publicly traded company. If you look at the figures, Hasbro's in big trouble. Hasbro really are losing money quicker than they can make it. And frankly, if you look at the figures and the way they've broken down those figures, the reality is that Baldur's Gate 3 saved their bacon last year. They really saved their bacon. Because whilst their products and IP is making money, it's not making half enough money as what they would like or even what they need. And Hasbro are in billions of debt. Like, they're in big debt. And I hear that they actually, and I should preface all of this, by the way, by saying that I am not a journalist. I don't normally report on this sort of stuff, but there's so much to unpack here that I kind of wanted to do a video and hop on and talk about this stuff, because I think it's I think there's a lot going on, and I think it's very easy to miss a lot of details. And I've been following a lot of what Hasbro's been doing quite heavily since the OGL, and haven't really taken my eye off the ball here. But yeah, I have heard, and data certainly suggests that they actually don't have enough cash reserves to even pay the dividends of their shareholders. And if that's the case, they kind of don't have much in the way of choices. They can obviously choose to not pay the dividend to their shareholders, but of course that means their share price is going to plummet, and as a big corporation like that, that's the last thing you want. So they don't really have that as an option in reality. It is an option, but it's not a viable one. And so then they either have to sell more shares, which, again, they dilute control of the company that way if they do that. So they're probably going to want to avoid that if they can. And the only other way to really kind of generate the cash that they need is to start selling stuff. And they need to sell stuff that's worth a lot. And this is where ultimately some of my argument comes for actually why this may not be so off the wall. Because Dungeons & Dragons has never been worth more. It has never been worth more than it is now, and it has peaked. And arguably, it will never be worth as much as it is now. Despite the fact that Hasbro are under the belief that it has been very significantly under-monetized. But they've got a lot of things that they need to do, and I think, frankly, the OGL scandal of last year kind of really shot them in the foot in terms of the value of D&D. Like, they kind of hurried along the peak of D&D, because I feel as though they still could have, if they monetized correctly and used the right sort of strategies, they probably could have got away with a fair bit in terms of increasing that upward trend. It would have slowed, certainly, but they probably could have, calmed it down a little bit. But I think the OGL thing just actually hastened the decline. So D&D is not going to be worth more. It's under-monetized, so it doesn't make much money for Hasbro. And it's also been reported that the C-suite at Hasbro, whilst the creators, the people in Wizards of the Coast, the people making the game, designing the game, love the game, the C-suite reportedly don't care much for it. In fact, when they were at the Creators Summit that went terribly wrong for Hasbro last year, many of the creators actually offered many of the executives to run games for them so that they could get a better grasp of what the game meant and why it was important to people. And they declined, which only lines up with what we've been hearing about their disdain for the game itself. Again, I can't corroborate any of this. This is just stuff that I have heard from sources that I trust. Not sources that have reported directly to me, just sources that I have watched on YouTube and the like. One of which being Stephen Glicker, who is probably the person who's kept me most informed on this, again, through his YouTube videos, Roll for Combat. And we'll come back to him in a minute because things get even more interesting there. So the reality is if Hasbro is going to sell D&D, now is the time. And if they need to make money, D&D is probably arguably one of the best ones for them to make money off of through selling. They could probably sell it for $1 billion. Bearing in mind, D&D is probably only making them about $250 million a year, I think, is the figure. So they could probably easily sell it for $1 billion, which could save their bacon, really. And maybe have those rights revert after a certain amount of time, although the longer that period of time, the more they can sell it for, obviously. So, the other thing is yes, Larian would make sense. If Larian could afford it, because Baldur's Gate has been a huge financial success. And so, if you're going to sell it, you're going to want to sell it to Larian, because, again, they have a track record, they love D&D, and they are able to make a lot of profit. And if you pitch that to Tencent, who part-own Larian, and say, well, look, if we sell it to you guys, you can then get Larian involved, and then from there, they've got look how much money they have made off of the back of the rights to D&D. Imagine if you owned the rights to create as many D&D games as you like using Larian, that's a surefire way of a return on investment, on paper, at least. I have kind of not looked at the article for a while as I've gone off on that, but that's basically the breakdown as I see it here. Now, there are arguments being made that a lot of this is not actually for the rights of Dungeons & Dragons fully, but actually for the rights of the video game side of things. But that I find an interesting argument, because for all intents and purposes, Hasbro at the moment aren't interested in printing books for Dungeons & Dragons. They're interested in digitizing Dungeons & Dragons because they see that as where the money is. So, as far as I'm concerned, if you start selling the digital rights to Dungeons & Dragons as opposed to the actual structuring of the game, by Hasbro's own measurement, they are selling the game to somebody else. If this report happens to be true, because the first thing that cropped up in my mind when I saw this report was that this sounded very familiar. And I mentioned a minute ago Stephen Glicker of Roll for Combat fame, shall we say. Now, Stephen Glicker, he knows his stuff. He's been involved in the industry and working for Fortune 500 companies. He knows his stuff. And he was the one that leaked the original OGL scandal before anybody else. I trust his stance on things because he's got a good track record. And 2 weeks ago, he put out a video which sounded very familiar to this, where he basically said, well, do you know what? Hasbro's in trouble. And if I was Hasbro, here is what I would do. If I wanted to make money, I would want to sell the rights to Dungeons & Dragons, much like Marvel did when they were on the brink of bankruptcy decades ago. I'm going to want to sell rights, because rights are a great way of making money without actually putting in too much work. They've seen that with Baldur's Gate, right? That saved their bacon, so they're going to want to do that again. And then he said, well, if I was going to do that, who would I want to sell D&D to? Well, it would be Larian. But Larian don't have the money. So you can't go to Larian because they don't have the funds. So who do you go to instead? You go to Tencent. So as soon as I saw this article, I was like, either this isn't true, this article. Either it's not true and somebody has taken what Stephen Glicker said and reported it as fact, or this is true and Stephen Glicker is like Nostradamus. Even Stephen Glicker, when he went live yesterday, was shocked at the accuracy of what he had said based on this article. However, it's interesting because I think that this has been based off of Stephen Glicker's idea. I don't actually think, in reality, that this is based in truth. I think Stephen Glicker's assessment of the situation is very accurate and I think makes a hell of a lot of sense, and I actually think would be a really good move for everyone, for the entire hobby, because Hasbro will get their money, Larian will get D&D essentially, albeit by proxy through Tencent, but also Larian love the game. They would really look after it. They'd be pumped, I'm sure, to produce D&D books as well, if they were allowed to, with whatever licensing agreement was done, or even if they owned it outright. And also, I think the community would be pretty happy. But I don't think it's... I mean, look, this is all speculation on my part. Again, I'm not a journalist. I have done my research and tried to gather as much information as I can, but in reality, there's not much information on this out here. There is really not much information because Speed Daily seem to be the only people reporting on this. And when you look into this, this is incredibly close to what Stephen Glicker was saying, almost to the letter. And so the current working theory I have, and a few other people have kind of come to the conclusion too, is that video from Stephen Glicker must have been transcribed and put through some AI to report this. the Dungeon Masterpiece, Baron de Rop, put out a video yesterday. He was trying to do an investigation live on stream yesterday as he was trying to study this, and he came to that conclusion as well. So I won't go into all the evidence. You can have a look at that. But I think that's probably what's happened here. I think this is a rip of Stephen Glicker's theory. Well, it wasn't even theory. It was an idea, speculation. And that's kind of where I'm sitting at the moment, until more evidence presents itself. I don't think that they are in talks right now, though it would be great. And I think Hasbro are kind of assessing things on a greater level, but as of right now, I don't think that this is legit. But I'm happy to eat my words. But there is another story that I do want to cover, which I think is also a pretty big deal, which I'll come to in a second. Simon, you have popped in a question into chat. Will 5.56e even occur if there's a sale in the offing? Surely the new owners would want to put their own stamp on things. That's a good question, Simon. I actually think that it will happen. I don't think it's something that's going to be put on ice because, in reality, these things probably is going to take. This will probably take at least 6 months to ratify anyway, I would have thought. Which means that in reality, they're going to be so far along into 5.5 and 6th edition that it will probably happen. But the other thing is to think about is, the new owners probably do want to put their own stamp on it. But also, Hasbro are going to want to make this sale, if such a sale did happen. And we are talking hypothetically here, because again, I'm not even sure that this is legit at this point. But hypothetically speaking, if they did want a sale to happen, Hasbro are going to want to make Dungeons and Dragons look as promising a deal as they possibly can. They're really going to want to up the value. I know, Simon, from conversations that we have had, that you're a big Star Wars fan, and this makes me think of the sale of Star Wars to Disney, right? George Lucas wanting to take his Star Wars. He started doing treatments for Episode 7 and the sequel trilogy as a bargaining chip to get as much as he could out of Disney. Which, of course, they did pay for then, and actually were happy to announce on the day of acquisition that, the new trilogy was good to go. And then they kind of stripped it for parts. And I think that's probably what would happen here. I think 5.5 would happen, or the 2024 rules update, or whatever they're going to call it. That will happen. That's my prediction if there were a sale. And I don't think there will be. But if there were to be, then that would happen, and then they'd see how things go, and at that point, I'm pretty sure they would put pen to paper, put Larian in charge, and start having them work on a new edition. Because the other thing is this 2024 rules update isn't a new edition. As far as marketing is concerned. So, with that in mind, they could just continue on and then be like, aha, here is our version of it. And I think everybody would be pretty happy with that. So that's my take. I think it makes sense for a sale to happen for all the things that I've said. I think now would be a very good time to do it. And I think it would make a hell of a lot of sense for Hasbro. But if you look at Hasbro's history, they are very reticent to sell any of their IP because in their mind, their IP is everything. And also, we have to consider the fact that Magic the Gathering and D&D are the things that are keeping the company afloat right now. So I don't know if that would happen. And also, you have to bear in mind, a couple of years ago, there was a shareholders battle to try and spin Wizards of the Coast off into its own separate company because Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons was the thing keeping Hasbro alive. So on that basis, I don't know if they would sell it because they fought tooth and nail to keep it in the first place. Of course, tied in with Magic the Gathering as well. So who knows? But anyway, just before we continue, I hope you found this video insightful. I am just this is very much kind of hot take stuff after a night of hours of research. But if you have found this video interesting, then do make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon. And of course, if you do like this sort of stuff and you're one of our regular viewers, because doing new stuff on Arcana Unearthed is fairly new for me, because again, the playtest is ended, so I don't really know what to do with this live stream format that I have already set up. So if you do like news stuff, let me know in the comments, but also if you prefer more kind of practical game mastering stuff or other stuff we can live stream, then share your thoughts. I'm happy to listen to whatever it is your suggestions might be on how we can make live streams interesting, outside of looking at the playtest material now. And of course, don't forget as well to smash that like button for me, because that really does help to feed the hungry algorithm that exists here on YouTube. Alright, so the other thing, and so this was a whirlwind day yesterday, because I was already kind of like, okay, well, I don't really know what I'm going to do with Arcana Unearthed now, because the playtest is over, and then I saw that Stephen Glicker on Roll for Combat had set up a live stream for yesterday evening where he was going to talk about this new OGL that was coming out, and I thought, oh my god, here we go again. And it started to have flashbacks to last year and how all the shit hit the fan last year. And then, as soon as I closed the window looking at that live stream and trying to get the details of that, I saw an article pop up about this potential sale. So it was a whirlwind day. But this OGL news from Roll for Combat kind of slipped under the radar, even on their own stream, I must admit. So what we're talking about here is there is rumours abound now that there are... I mean, I'm calling it a new OGL. It's not a new OGL. And Stephen Glicker was doing the same. It's not a new OGL. It's a new contract of sorts. Kind of a bit akin to an OGL, but slightly different. So rumours abound that there are these new contracts supposedly being sent around to some of the largest D&D developers. And they are third-party D&D developers who have been working with Hasbro recently / currently, so I will let you read between the lines on that. And that has been confirmed by a number of sources to Roll for Combat as well, that these contracts are being sent out. Now, this contract that's being sent out is... it's unclear exactly what it is, but it certainly seems to be that this contract is about content deals with Hasbro, such as, and again, I'll let you read between the lines here, such as exposure of their products on D&D Beyond. Right? So those same people have apparently said that this new contract or license or whatever it is incredibly favourable. Like, massively favourable. In fact, one of those developers is quoted as saying to Stephen Glicker that this contract is everything they wanted and more, unquote. So it's really, really very favourable. Now, what's interesting here is that we obviously know with the OGL stuff, and I won't go into too much detail about the OGL because it was widely reported, I'm sure you're familiar with it, was all about kind of hitting third-party developers with the proverbial stick and saying, no, you're not using OGL 1.0A, you're now moving to this new one. But that was obviously then retracted fairly quickly because they realised that they couldn't force people over to the new license. So, this new contract apparently is to help get people onto these platforms and encourage them to do so. But if D&D 2024 is not a new edition, then arguably a new license isn't required, particularly because 5th edition is now in Creative Commons as well, right? So, and also, like, this new 2024 rules update is supposed to be backwards compatible with 2014. But I think we need to talk a little bit about what that actually means in reality, because it's very easy to kind of get carried away with what this backwards compatible thing means. Because in reality, the only thing that they need to do, as far as I can see, and I am no game designer, so I could be wrong, and I'm happy to stand corrected on this, but the only thing I see that they actually need to do in order to make sure that it is backwards compatible is to ensure that everything still works around a D20, that the maths remains the same in so much as this idea of bounded accuracy, in so much as no matter how powerful the characters get, the difficulty classes will always, for success on rolling of a D20, will always range from 5 to, I think it's 30 or 35, right? And it won't go beyond that. That's the idea. You keep it in that box. So long as that maths remains the same, then arguably, whatever they come out with next is going to remain backwards compatible, because ultimately, they don't need it to be backwards compatible with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. What they need it to be backwards compatible with is things like Wild Beyond the Witchlight, or Icewind Dale, or Baldur's Gate, right? They need it to be backwards compatible with these adventures, and all that ultimately these adventures run on is the DC, the difficulty class system. Everything else is pretty transferable, because the difficulty class system is the interaction between the Dungeon Master, the adventure, and the players. Everything else is kind of just number crunching, really, beyond that point, and just interacting with it. It doesn't matter what spells there are, it doesn't even matter what classes there are. They want to be able to say to you, yeah, all those adventures that you've bought, they are still valid. And they're also throwing in this idea of, yeah, well, all the classes that you played previously are valid as well, except you're going to have to do some conversions, but they are valid. So if that is true, then a new license isn't needed, right? But if a new license isn't needed, then they have a problem, because if you don't need a new license and you don't need to force people over to the new rules, whilst you're also saying that everything's backwards compatible, then the third parties can continue to make money off of the old system, and you're still struggling to monetize this new rules update. But they've tried to kind of nudge people away from that by kind of trying to revoke the old OGL, but they couldn't do that. So they've backed off of that, and now they're trying a new strategy. That's how I see this. It's a new strategy of carrot rather than stick, right? So what they're doing, as far as I can see, and this is good business as far as I'm concerned. This isn't particularly nefarious. This is just good business. Because ultimately Hasbro need to make more money. They are struggling. They need to make more money, and they need to make more money quick. So if they can get all of these big third-party developers to get in these content deals with D&D, so that all of their stuff is on D&D Beyond and everywhere else, we'll come to that in a minute. If D&D are plugging all of these third-party creators into their system, they're going to want to make sure that those third-party developers are then utilizing the 2024 rules, right? Because then that's a value to their customer, and if that's a value to, that's Hasbro's customer, and if that's a value to Hasbro's customer, that customer is then going to buy more stuff on D&D Beyond with the third-party stuff. D&D, Hasbro are going to take their cut, and Hasbro's going to make more money that way. Kind of a little bit like how Apple make money on the App Store on your iPhone, right? They don't make the apps. The app developers make the apps. They put it on their marketplace. They take a cut. This is exactly what Hasbro's doing, and this is what they should have done in the first place. But now, because they can't use the stick, they're having to use the carrot, and they're realizing that actually the marketplace is the value. But also the other thing that they can do, and again, if you look at Apple and how Apple are doing this, this is how it works. Because Apple will update your phone every year, and you will eventually move on to the new update. Because if you don't, your apps will stop working. And if your apps stop working, you're going to go, okay, well, I'm going to update to the new system, and then you're going to get all of your apps back. And all of the app developers that are staying relevant are moving on to the new software update. It's the same thing going on here. So you get the third-party developers onto D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond, to stay relevant on there, they need to keep up with the rules system that is being developed by Hasbro, by D&D. So that then eventually, by osmosis, kind of over time, insidiously, they start to move all of their content over to the 2024 rules. Then what's going to happen, of course, is the more the big third-party developers are using the 2024 rules, the quicker the 2014 rules become obsolete. But the 2024 rules haven't been released as part of OGL 1.0A. There isn't an SRD on 1.0A, which means that the 2024 rules, unless you're part of this license with Hasbro, aren't available to you. But the 2014 ones are. You know, they won and so did we, right? So this 2024 shift, this move, this kind of whining and dining of these creators, again, it's not nefarious, it's good business. They want to move people up to the new rules so that they can make more money off of it, get it into D&D Beyond, get it into the walled garden system, right? And then take the cream off the top, which is, again, very good business. Can you imagine how much more money Hasbro would have made by now if MCDM's Strongholds and Followers was on D&D Beyond, if MCDM's Flea Mortals was on D&D Beyond, if NCDM's Kingdoms and Warfare was on D&D Beyond, if all of the Darrington Press stuff was on D&D Beyond, at least the D&D stuff, right? And then all of the other big publishers as well. Right? Imagine how much more money they would have made through D&D Beyond. And D&D Beyond is important because D&D Beyond is what plugs everything in together. Yeah, you can put things on the DM's Guild as a publisher, sure. Yes, Hasbro are still going to take their cut. But these days we've moved into the digital-first world, and whether we like it or not, D&D now is played more online than it is around a table, which is a shame. But it's a reality of life. You know, it's a reality of technology. And we can either fight it or embrace it. Now, do I want D&D to turn into a video game? No. I want it to still be about human interaction, whether that be through a screen or whether it be round the table. Round the table, obviously, being the preferred option in my mind. But that's not the way it's gone. And people don't want to have to carry around, 3 massive tomes just to DM at their friend's house when they can have it on a tablet or on their laptop, right? So then it becomes a lot easier, and you can use D&D Beyond to take a lot of the heavy, crunchy maths out. Not that there's a lot in 5th edition, but still, you get the point, right? You get to take some of that crunchiness out, and D&D Beyond works for you. But you can't do that with MCDM, Stronghold, and Followers. Like, it doesn't plug in that nice. Unless, of course, they had a deal where it was plugged into D&D Beyond, and you could just flick a switch on your character sheet, and suddenly all your stuff about your Strongholds pops up on there. Right? And that then becomes quite tempting for the third-party developers, because they're like, oh, well, we get D&D's audience, we get Hasbro's audience, we don't have to promote as hard. I mean, still we're going to have to promote, right? But it's on a marketplace there for everybody to see. And it also gets plugged into D&D Beyond, so it's going to get used. Because part of the problem with these third-party developers, the content they're putting out, is a lot of it doesn't get used because you just can't conveniently plug it into D&D Beyond. Right? And so the character sheet in D&D Beyond becomes the proverbial operating system to D&D's iPhone, right? And D&D Beyond becomes the App Store, and these third-party books become the apps. So then, from there, you then shift everything over to the 2024 rule books, and then suddenly people aren't using the 2014 rules anymore. And that's when Hasbro can strike. Add to that whilst all of this was being discussed yesterday, it so happened that Foundry made an announcement that they had now partnered with Hasbro to officially bring 5th edition D&D over, and the 2024 rules, which that slipped under the radar on the announcement, and the 2024 rules is going to be officially supported on Foundry with Hasbro's blessing, which has not been the case up until yesterday. Which means that there's been, and this was done in a way that a lot of the developers didn't know it was coming. So this was done on the quiet, very secretively by Hasbro and Foundry, right? So this stuff is happening. These contracts are being put out there, and I think Foundry was one of the first. And a lot of people are saying, okay, well, they've been doing that with Roll20 and whatnot, but I don't think they've got an agreement on the 2024 rules yet, although Roll20 may have that already agreed by now. But the point is if you think about the strategy that I've just laid out, this becomes important again, because having it on Foundry and having it on D&D Beyond as a consumer, if you own Curse of Strahd on D&D Beyond, that doesn't become available to you on Foundry. You got to buy it again on Foundry. And each time, like, you got it on Roll20, you got it at Foundry, you got it in D&D Beyond, you got it in the book. Each time, Hasbro are taking their cut. But we also have to be aware that Hasbro's not making that much money on the books. Where they're making the money is on D&D Beyond and on their licensing deals. And it feels as though Hasbro have finally woken up to this properly. The fact that it's on Foundry now, I think, is a sign of things to come, and I think it's going to be ubiquitous on all platforms, because eventually that Foundry update, when the new system comes out officially, that update is going to happen, and it's going to be forced through on Foundry, it's going to be forced through on Roll20, it's going to be forced through on D&D Beyond, and everybody's going to be playing the 2024 rules kind of quietly, and before they know it, kind of insidiously, they're not going to be playing the 2014 version anymore. So, in a way, to use the carrot and stick analogy, they're taking the carrot approach now of trying to sweet talk these developers into a deal with them, which, from all sounds, like, again, I'm not saying that Hasbro are being nefarious here. They're achieving what they want to achieve, and they tried to do it nefariously earlier, like last year, but now it seems as though they've woken up a little bit and, are trying a different tact. The goal is the same. Right? The goal is the same. They want everybody playing 2024, and they want to be in control of that. But it sounds as though they're cooking up a pretty nice deal. Again, the guys who I know for a fact have already signed it, again, just take a look on D&D Beyond. Apparently they were quoted as saying, the deal is everything they wanted and more. So they're being wined and dined. They're being treated well. Apparently it's all a very good deal. So it's not even that they're using the carrot instead of the stick. It's like they're using a golden carrot, to the extent that hopefully people forget about the carrot of the OGL before too long and are happy with the golden carrot that they've got with this new deal. So much so that everything's just going to slip by osmosis into the 2024 rules, and then at that point Hasbro's got what they want and the community is happy at the same time. Because, let's be honest, I think people would be more receptive to D&D Beyond if they could support third parties through it. Now, of course, people would rather go directly to third parties, and I agree. But if they can have the convenience is king. Right? If they can have the convenience of being able to run D&D on D&D Beyond and have all of their third-party content that just plugs in nicely like a little plugin that they can attach to their D&D Beyond character sheets, I actually think that's the dream from a player's perspective and a DM's perspective. Like, I'd be up for that. And, from Hasbro's perspective, why have Foundry be able to do something like that when you can do that yourselves with D&D Beyond and, own your shit. So that's my thoughts on all of those. Again, it's been a big bumper week this week, a real big bumper week for all of D&D. Like, so much has been going down. But that was my take. Digimon Deck Labs. Hi, Digimon. Have you seen the D&D adventure magazines that are out? They have short little quests in the back of them. It's a nice way to get new DMs and new players to learn the game. I have seen those. I haven't invested myself, but I have certainly seen them. I think a lot of it seems pretty good. I don't know. I'm assuming that that's just a license deal that Hasbro have put out there for somebody to create such a thing, as opposed to it being produced by Hasbro itself. But my impression I get, and partly why I haven't invested, is because it is very... I've been playing 5th edition since pretty much the day it came out, so I'm fairly familiar with it. and a lot of that stuff seems targeted at newer folk. So that seemed a little bit more on the basic side for what I need. But yes, I think it's good that these things are happening. And a good move. But of course, the best thing that you can do if you want to learn how to play D&D is play D&D. And if you are not familiar, or if you have got somebody that would like to play D&D and you don't have room at your table, then please send them my way, because we have our Bardic Quest Adventurers Guild, which is essentially powered by the folks that Start Playing Games. You can head on over to Start Playing Games, or rather, if you want to go specifically with me as your DM, bardicquest.com/play, and you'll be able to see a breakdown of all of our adventures there. Yeah, you can pay to play, book in with one of our campaigns, and get playing with me as your DM and some of the other friendly folk, some of whom have been in the chat today, to get playing D&D, of course. But yeah, so there's been a lot going on. It's going to be a very interesting next 6 months, I think, as we kind of see how all of this plays out. We will probably get the official launch date for 2024 sometime in March, because Gamma is happening, which is the trade show. So Hasbro are going to want to announce that by then, I'm sure. So we're probably looking at March before we actually know the full official release date for 2024. But Foundry's in. A few other big name creators are in, it seems. And again, this sounding like this deal is everything they want and more, unquote, is certainly promising. Perhaps Hasbro have woken up a little bit here. But all of this going on at the same time, is there a sale happening? I'm sure the idea has been floated about. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody at Hasbro saw Stephen Glicker's video a couple of weeks ago and thought, that's not a bad idea, and maybe floated the idea around. Who knows? We will see. But my hunch on that is that it was a take on Stephen Glicker's prediction, hypothesis. Not even hypothesis, just kind of general throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks, and maybe took that idea and ran with it, and possibly even churned it through some AI. But a lot going on this week. I'm going to go have a lie down now and a cup of tea, I think, and kind of process it all. And I'm sure we'll be back with more. Again, doing these live streams with the Arcana Unearthed kind of logo above me was intended for playtest material, but the playtest is now over. So do let me know in the comments if you'd like more news-based stuff, or if you prefer more GM-based stuff, and I will take that feedback on board. But in the meantime, thanks for tuning in. Thank you for those that put questions in the chat as well, and I will see you on the next video whenever there's more news or playtest material, or who knows what. But do make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that bell icon, and I will catch you on the next video.